historically, if you just look at the S&P 500, which is a good proxy for the entire stock market, going back to its inception all the way up to 2019, the average analyzed historic return of the stock market has been around 10%. Hey guys, if you like this episode today, I want you to go and click the subscribe button to make sure that you get all of our future episodes, as well as we put out multiple episodes of valuable content every single week to help you with your investment banking recruiting process. Okay, and today I want to talk about how you can get to $1 million in net worth in the shortest amount of time. Now, I want to not just talk about it, but put some real numbers behind it, right? This will be more of a thought exercise as opposed to like saying, this is exactly what's going to happen, which obviously, the reality is going to be different for every single person. But we're just going to make some very reasonable assumptions and show you two totally different paths in terms of what could happen with your lifetime earnings potential and your career trajectory. Okay, I know a lot of students that we speak to, they have aspirations of one day becoming a millionaire, right? Or sometimes even a not just millionaire, but they don't want to just be worth 7 figures, but maybe even 8 figures, right? But I think sometimes these numbers get so astronomical, and most people have never had $1 million before, that it just sounds great and has a great ring to it. They don't really know exactly what it's going to take to get to that $1 million mark, right? And so I want to just show you some quick and dirty back of the envelope calculations in terms of numbers. Okay, so first, what I did here was I'm showing you what you could expect to make as an investment banker after you graduate, right? And I'm just making some reasonable assumptions. So I've mapped out the first 10 years of someone's career in investment banking. And this is assuming that you land at one of the top banks, like a reputable, let's call it like a bulge bracket or elite boutique bank. Okay. So starting with your pre-tax income, this includes your salary as well as your bonus year end. Obviously your first year, you're going to start as a first year analyst. And then by your 10th year, if everything goes according to plan, you'll probably be an analyst for 3 years. You're an associate for another 3 years. Your VP, say, for another 3 years. And then by the time you're, 30 years old, 10th year out of school, you should be probably a first year director in banking, right? And so the pre-tax compensation here, I've just taken these as like ballpark numbers. Like you can go do your own research on these to verify that this is accurate, but you're going to find that, plus or minus, obviously depends on the bank, depends on the group you're in. Everyone's going to be a little bit different. And also the more senior you get, the more variance there will be in terms of your overall compensation, because the bonus is going to have bigger swings. But as a first year analyst, on average, let's say you're starting out around $130,000. Then it goes up to $150,000 your second year. Then it goes up to $170,000 your third year. Then by the time you're an associate, you're making anywhere from, let's call it $250,000 to $400,000. Then by the time you're a VP and up, you're making anywhere from $500,000 to $750,000 a year. Okay, $750,000 a year, let's say, by the time you make director. So overall, like within the first 10 years of your career, you're taking home about $3.9 million, right? That's the sum of your first 10-year salary plus bonus. Okay, now obviously you don't get to take home all of that. You're going to pay taxes on it, right? For a simplifying assumption, I've assumed that you pay 30% taxes, which we can come back and play with this assumption later on. But for now, let's just assume, okay, it's a 30% tax rate. That means that even though you made $3.9 million over the first 10 years, you're only taking home about 2.7. Okay, and I say only, but you're taking home about $2.7 million. And then in terms of your living expenses, here I'm again making some assumptions, and of course you can play with these numbers too. But the assumption I made is that your first year out of school, let's say you're living in New York City because you're working in investment banking, your rent is probably going to be on average around $3,000 a month. And again, you can go Google what's the average rent in New York City, but I think $3,000 is a reasonable assumption for someone fresh out of school in a city like New York. Maybe you have roommates, and depending on what area you live in. And then I added another $2,500 or so for like all of your other expenses. So this is like food, utilities, entertainment, whatever. Again, you can make this number higher if you want. You can make it lower. Doesn't really matter. But let's say you're spending $5,500 a month. That means over 12 months in a year, you're going to spend $66,000, right? So after taxes, you brought home around $91,000 and you're spending $66,000. So you have excess income or disposable income of another $25,000 left at the end of the year, okay? Now, I also assume that as you make more money over time and as you get older, your living expenses are going to go up, right? Because you're not going to always live with roommates. Eventually, you're going to, start dating. You might get married. You might even eventually have kids. And so for now, I've just assumed that your cost of living is also going to go up by 10% a year, right? So by your 10th year out of school, you went from spending $66,000 a year to $156,000, okay? And this is just obviously, look, you might get married, you might start a family, but also, your spouse might work. And I'm not factoring their income into this, right? I'm just talking about you right now. So I'm growing your expenses at 10% a year. And then so column D minus column E here gets us column F, which is your excess income. So your first year, like I said, you have about $25,000 of excess income. And then that grows over time because your earnings is growing so much faster, especially when you work in banking, is growing by, tens of thousands of dollars a year, right? Whereas your expenses aren't going up quite as fast, right? Nowhere anywhere close to that, right? So your excess income by your 5th year is $138,000, right? And it only goes up from there. By your 10th year, based on these assumptions that we made so far, your excess income could be $370,000 almost, right? And so this column here, the cumulative savings, is basically just the cumulative running total of your excess income every single year, right? So if I add up all these numbers, like this is 57, this is 96, this is 191, this is 328. So like after 5 years, you've saved up about $329,000 in the bank. And this assumes that you just park your money in the bank and you don't invest it at all. You're not growing the excess income that you have. You're not generating a return on it, which is honestly not very realistic, right? But if you look at this, even in this scenario, okay, by year 8, you have broken the $1 million mark. So at that point, if you started out at age 21, by age 28, before you even turn 30, you've now reached just over $1 million in savings, right? In reality, look, if you're in finance, you're working in banking, and even if you're not in finance, a lot of people, they know that when they have excess income, what are you supposed to do with it? You're supposed to invest it, right? So here to the right, what I've done is I built a table. It's kind of like a waterfall schedule saying, hey, each year, how much excess income am I making? And so you'll see these are this first year in each cohort, this is the excess income, right? So I'll just highlight that for you. So you'll see this matches this, right? You'll see that this number matches this number matches this number matches this number. So basically we're just taking the excess income every year, we're moving it over here, and then we're assuming some sort of return on our excess income. So here, for now, the baseline assumption is I assume we can generate at least a 10% return every single year. Why did I pick 10%? Because historically, if you just look at the S&P 500, which is a good proxy for the entire stock market, going back to its inception all the way up to 2019, the average analyzed historic return of the stock market has been around 10%. Okay, so if I just put my money into the stock market every single year and I close my eyes and I never touch that money ever again, I'll just let it grow, the expectation is that it should grow at about 10% a year. Okay. So if I'm growing my first year's excess income, which is $25,000, by 10% a year, by year 10, because it's compounding at 10% every year, by year 10, that number went from 25,000 and it's grown to 59,000, right? Then we do a similar exercise for year 2. Year 2, our excess income was higher. It was 32,000. We grow that by 10% a year. By year 10, which is 9 years out from when it first started, it grows to about 69,000, right? Year 3 goes from 39 to 76. Year 4 goes from 94 to 167. Year 5 goes from 138 to 222 by year 10, and so on and so forth, right? And then what you could do is you can add up all of the different cohorts, right? And then so this last row here at the bottom tells you what your total net worth is. This is the amount of money that you will have in the bank, right? So if we just invested all of our excess income and we were able to grow it by about 10% a year for the remainder of our life, again, by year 8, you get to about $1.2 million in net worth, right? So same thing, like by year 28, basically, by age 28, you get to about 1.23 million. The difference between this and what we looked at earlier is that if you don't invest at all and you're not earning that 10%, then by year 8, you're almost like exactly at $1 million. Whereas here you're at 1.23, so you have an extra $230,000 for investing your money during that time, which is great, right? But regardless, my point is, it doesn't really change that much how long it takes you to get to that $1 million mark. It's about 7 or 8 years out of school, right? By year 10, you have about $2.2 million. So you can try to poke holes in this. You can say, well, look, this is like, these are really aggressive assumptions, or you're being way too optimistic or whatever. We can build a more conservative case, right? We can raise our taxes from 30% to 40%, let's just say. Okay, 40% is really high, by the way. Okay, so that pushes out our $1 million year from year 8 to year 9, right? By year 8, we only get to $908,000. So in year 9, we get to 1.25. Still not too shabby, right? Let's say my lifestyle is creeping up a lot faster than 10%. Let's say I'm increasing it by 20% a year. Okay, because I love spending money. I like buying nice things. I like going shopping, or I'm dating a girl that likes expensive bags and I have to buy her presents all the time. Whatever. Okay, let's double that. Let's double your the growth of your living expenses from 10% to 20% a year. Then we look out. Okay, now at the end of year 10, you only get to about $848,000. Okay, so not quite $1 million. Now it's probably going to take you out until year 11 or year 12 maybe to get to that $1 million, right? But again, I'm being really punitive here with these assumptions. I'm assuming you're going to pay 40% taxes every year, and I'm assuming that you're going to spend 20% more in costs every single year. If you just think about the pace of inflation or how quickly prices are increasing, typically inflation grows at like 2 or 3% every year. So if you're spending 20% more in expenses year after year, every year, that's like you're significantly improving your lifestyle, basically, right? By your 10th year out of school, your annual living expenses is $340,000 a year. That's almost $20,000 a month. You gotta think about what kind of lifestyle you could have if you could spend $20,000 a month, right? You're probably not going to spend that much money, right? Or you don't need to. At least you could, but you don't need to, right? How do we get this back to $1 million within 10 years? What if we could do better than 10%? 10% is just, again, the overall market return, right? What if you could do 15%? Now you're at $984,000. That's pretty much almost at $1 million, right? So this is a nice little calculator that you can play with. If I bring this back down, living expenses grows by 15% a year. Now I'm back in business. Now I'm back at $1 million by year 9, right? So regardless, though, the point is, if the most important thing is still the starting point. It's like, how much money are you bringing in pre-tax, right? Because if you have this type of earnings trajectory pre-tax, then you're gonna eventually hit $1 million. It's just a matter of time, right? It's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when, right? Now let's look at an alternate scenario, okay? So I call the second scenario the average trajectory, right? And so same thing, we're gonna go 10 years out, okay? And I don't know, this is basically assuming if you're not doing banking, you're just an average college grad in the United States. So year 1 through year 10 out of school, your pre-tax income, I started your year 1 income at $51,000. Why did I pick $51,000? Well, if you go do a quick Google search, I just searched for average U.S. college graduate salary, you'll see that it's about $51,000. And there's different sources that you can look into. They all come out around $50,000 to $51,000. I've checked multiple sources before, and this is ballpark correct. So I'm just going to use $51,000, okay? This is based on 2019 survey data, right? And then I'm going to say, okay, how much will we grow our annual compensation by every single year? Well, I would say for most people, it's probably anywhere between, I don't know, 3 to 5% a year, right? Like if you just stay at your job and you just gradually get promoted and you gradually get slight bumps in your pay raises every single year, it's typically around 3 to 5% a year, in my experience, okay? In a regular job, that is. And just from seeing my other friends and classmates from college and whatever that have gone into those fields, right? We can also sanity check this. We say, hey, I actually looked this up, right? So I found this article. Here's how much grads earn 10 years after attending the best universities in America, okay? So I know not everyone attends the best universities in America, but let's just assume that that's a good proxy, right? So this is based on U.S. Department of Education's college scorecard, which provides the median earnings of federally aided students 10 years after enrolling. CNBC looked at the stats for the top 10 universities in America, okay? And so at number 10 was the University of Chicago, right? 10 years after graduating, okay, $65,500 is how much they're making 10 years out of school. And who are the rest of the schools on the list? CIT, Duke, Columbia, Princeton, UPenn, Yale, Stanford, Harvard, MIT. So basically like all the Ivy League schools plus some of the other very elite colleges like, Stanford and CIT and schools like that, okay, in Chicago. So these are like the who's, right? These are like the best colleges out there. The highest average salary or average compensation was MIT. So MIT, 10 years after graduating, was around $94,000. So basically the range, 10 years out of school, the range was anywhere from $65,500 to $94,000. Okay. So if we keep that number in mind, if we come back to our calculator, if you're starting at 51 and you grew your salary by 3% every year, then pretty much by year 10, you get to around $66,000, which is that Chicago number. Okay. And again, this is basically the 10th school here, right? Then what if we bump this up to say 5%? Okay, then you get to about $79,000 by year 10. What if I bump this up to 7.5%? Let's be a bit more aggressive. Let's say I can increase my salary by 7.5% a year because I'm a rock star. Okay, now in year 10, you're making $98,000, which, by the way, is kind of that MIT number that we saw, right? 94, so it's a little bit more than that, right? So if you grow by 7.5%, you're still under $100,000 a year by the time you're 30. Versus if you were in investment banking, you were already making way over $100,000 a year your first year out of college when you were just 21. By the way, like when you're 21, you don't have a family, you don't have wife or husband or kids to take care of. It's just yourself. When you're 30, you're probably going to have all those things. You're going to have a lot more expenses. And so it's not just a compensation that's higher, but like your cost of living is also going to be higher as well, right? Now, we're not even done yet, right? Let's say, okay, so let's be aggressive. Let's assume that you do increase your compensation by 7.5% a year. Let's assume that by year 10, you're making just under $100,000, which is similar to what college grads from the top schools are making, right? These are all very optimistic assumptions. Let's assume that your tax rate is only 30%, okay? Your take-home comp post-tax, 10 years out of school, going from $98,000, you take away 30%, is still $68,000. You're only taking home $68,000, right? You look at $68,000, you compare that's the living expenses we assumed pretty much for the investment banking analyst for their first year out of school. That's about $5,500 a month. Except for the investment banking analyst, we were looking at that in year one. For this scenario, the average trajectory, that's year 10 out of school. So for living expenses, here, basically, I'm not even growing it by 10%. I'm just assuming because the take-home comp is so low, you're pretty much spending all of your money. You're spending all of your money that you're taking home. This is the definition of living paycheck to paycheck, right? Think about it, like up here with all these super aggressive assumptions, your 10th year out of school, you're spending $230,000 a year, which is almost $20,000 a month. Versus here, I'm saying you're going to spend 1/4 of that, 1/4 of that, $68,000. A little bit more than a quarter, but you get the point. It's like there's just not a whole lot of money left sitting around, and basically your excess income is going to be zero. So your savings is going to be zero. Your bank account is always just like barely breaking even. There's nothing to speak of in terms of investing or whatever. So none of this stuff to the right even matters, right? And then so forget about a net worth of $1 million. Like even at the pre-tax income level over 10 years, you've only made $721,000 through the first 10 years of your career. And that's before you pay taxes, before you pay for all your living expenses, before all of that. That's how drastically different this can be. So I think a lot of times when I try to explain to people the difference in terms of your career trajectory, in terms of your financial trajectory, in terms of your net worth, people don't really understand what I'm talking about. Like, they just think like, oh yeah, I know investment bankers make a lot of money. Like I know they make $100,000 plus first year out of school. You can't just think about the first year out of school. You got to think about the first 10 years out of school, the first 20, 30, 40 years. Like you're going to be hopefully around for a long time, right? And this doesn't just affect your starting point. It affects the slope of your trajectory over time, right? Like if your slope is steeper, your earnings is growing faster, everything compounds because now you have excess income. Now you can invest. Now your net worth is actually growing. You're not just making money with your time by slaving away at a 9-to-5 job. You're making money at work, but you're also making money with all of your excess income. You're investing, right? And anyone who's ever became wealthy at least partially through investing. No one ever got wealthy by just working, right? Because we only have 24 hours in a day, and you got to sleep too. So like there's really only so much time in a day, and if you're spending all of your waking hours working, even like you're still not going to get very far. Right? So that's why that first career out of school is so critical, so important, and that's why we always tell people like if you invest in a program like Wall Street Mastermind, some people say, oh, but Wall Street I don't want to spend money on something like Wall Street Mastermind. It's like, yeah, well, you got to view it as an investment because we have an over 90% success rate with helping people get into investment banking. And if we can most likely get you to this first scenario, this type of outcome over your lifetime, what do you think this is worth? How much would you pay to have this type of outcome, to have an over 90% probability of having this type of outcome? Because that's the return on your investment, right? Like if you want to become an investment banker, you got to learn to view things as an investment when they're an investment. You got to have that investor's mindset and be able to figure out what's a good investment versus a bad investment. Hey there, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you're looking for more customized advice that's tailored for your specific situation, then I invite you to book a free strategy session with our team at the link below. We'll talk to you soon.